आइए हम सुने विज्ञान की अनकही कहानियाँ। आइए हम सुने विज्ञान की अनसुनी कहानियाँ। एक नई दुनिया की आवाज़ आपकी आवाज़, विज्ञान की आवाज़, की आवाज़।
Celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, we bring you a podcast series on STEM popularization, science, technology, engineering, mathematics and medicine, supported and catalyzed by the National Council for Science and Technology Communication, Government of India. This program is produced by Media for Community Foundation. Creative content and technical support is given by Purvasha Banerjee and Shushanto Das.
एक नई दुनिया की आवाज़ आपकी आवाज़, विज्ञान की आवाज़, की आवाज़, की आवाज़।
Vigyan Ki Awaaz podcast series aims to popularize new ideas of science and technology, which highlight STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. This brings to the surface the efforts and researches of Indian scientists, which is desired to bring a change in community learning and teaching, access to knowledge of resources, and social paradigms. Our goal is to spread the name of indigenous Indian research stories and their masters among the masses of society in a very easy manner. Bose Institute was set up in 1917 by Sir Jagadish Chandra Bose, the founder of modern science in the Indian subcontinent. It is Asia's first modern research center devoted to interdisciplinary research and bears a century-old tradition. The institute was founded as not merely a laboratory but a temple, with its principal aims being the advancement of science and diffusion of knowledge. Swami Vivekananda, Sister Nivedita, whose influence is reflected in the institute's emblem of Vajra, was significant in the setting up of the institute, and Rabindranath Tagore were among those who had consistently inspired and supported Jagadish Chandra Bose in his endeavors. Ever since the establishment of the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India in May 1971, Bose Institute has been an autonomous grant-in-aid institution of DST. Over the last century, the institute has endlessly strived to preserve the legacy of its illustrious founder. In this podcast, we are happy to present Dr. Abhrajyoti Ghosh, Associate Professor in the Department of Biological Sciences in Bose Institute. He has worked on the first life from the earth. But before going into details about his research work, let us hear from his own voice about his academic journey.
I am Dr. Abhrajyoti Ghosh, presently working as an associate professor in Department of Biological Sciences at Bose Institute. I did my MSc and PhD both in biochemistry from University of Calcutta. During my PhD, I actually worked on discovering novel biotechnologically important bacteria and their enzymes from East Calcutta wetland area, which is a century-old waste disposal area for the city of Joy, Kolkata. So in 2008, I completed my PhD, and then I moved to Max Planck Institute for Terrestrial Microbiology, Marburg, Germany, where I was introduced for the first time to the world of third domain of life, namely archaea. So archaea basically belongs to prokaryotic domain, and we know about bacteria, but archaea are very special. They are distinct from bacteria as a prokaryote. Interestingly, they actually represent the early life form on Earth, evolved 3.5 billion years ago. So the first life form on Earth actually were archaea. And any study on archaea provide useful insights into how the early life form evolved from the very beginning of the Earth.
Dr. Ghosh speaks on his area of research in more details.
So today I will be mostly talking about stress adaptation. So during my PhD and postdoc, what I realized that microorganisms are highly resilient to stress adaptation. So they have very simple machinery, however, they can cope with ever-changing environment. So such studies involving the stress adaptation of microbes can provide many insights. For example, knowledge on how to plan to live in space or on other planets, like extraterrestrial environment. So in our lab at Bose Institute, we are working with two different aspects. One, microbial stress response, and the other one is adaptation using an interdisciplinary approach. So we use different techniques to understand how microbes adapt. Now we study model organisms as well as microbial communities to understand the adaptation strategies. So normally microbial stress response is investigated in model organisms. So in our case, we use two different model organisms. One, bacteria, which was isolated in Bose Institute from T. rhizosphere soil, Bacillus aryabhattai, and also one archaea, which is Sulfolobus acidocalderas, which is a thermoacidophilic archaea, which grows optimally at 75 degrees centigrade and at pH 2. So this organism was originally isolated by Professor Thomas Brock, who was a famous microbiologist in 1972 from Yellowstone National Park. So we are using these two organisms to understand how microbes actually cope with changing environment. So our main goal is to identify the molecular players that are involved in stress response and adaptation. We particularly focus on certain macromolecules or protein molecules in the cell and the complexes in the cell, including heat shock protein complexes, toxin-antitoxin systems, and different metabolic pathway members.
Dr. Abhrajyoti Ghosh speaks about his experiment and study on stress adaptation.
So any understanding of the stress adaptation. So now we are in a phase where we are having so many changes. One is changes in the environment, the climate change. Also, we are having changes in the pollution status around us in different environments, also social changes. So all these changes are at the organism level, how those changes are actually affecting the organism. So you need model to study them. So we are using these models to understand how these changes are actually modulated or the organism is coping to all these changes. So we are using different type of stresses. For example, heat is one of the aspects. Every year we are having increased ocean temperature. So this is also an important aspect where we are looking at the heat stress response to these organisms, how different molecular machines are actually trying to help the organism to cope with changing temperature. And also there are other stresses that we are presently looking at.
The study of adaptation shows how, as human, we can survive in changing environments. Dr. Abhrajyoti Ghosh speaks about the same.
So basically, there are many global leaders. Archaeal research in India is still in its infancy. So not many people in India is actually working on archaeal model organism. So that's why I have collaboration abroad. I am working with Professors Sonia Vedena-Alberts in University of Freiburg, Germany. And also I have other collaborators who are actively collaborating with us on different aspects, like Professor Kira Marakova from NIH, USA, and also some collaborators from India as well. We are working with Professor Ashish Bishwas from IIT Bhubaneswar. So we are trying to collaborate with many people in order to strengthen our observation and also to complement each other with respect to the observations that we have. In this study, from this study, we will identify many novel molecules which are involved in stress adaptation and stress mitigation. So we believe these molecules could be useful in future to better understand how, as human, we can survive in changing environment, and also how we can modify. So nowadays, it's like genome editing is one of the options, and if you identify a molecule that can provide resistance or help in coping to a changing environment, and if you can use genome editing technique, for example, the modern genome editing technique, to utilize that knowledge in human, for example, you can. But this is really far-fetched. It's a future, and I believe there are many possibilities in this area. So basically, in globally, these are very important studies that are going on. Many people are looking at different organisms, how they survive, because now we are looking for alternatives, because the human population is going really high, very fast, and we need alternative. First of all, we need new place for human inhabitation, and also we need different types of strategies to better survive in changing environment. And our study can provide useful insight into those proceedings.
Dr. Ghosh inserts an interesting idea on the survival of a cell.
So basically, there are molecules involved in different metabolic pathways, and those molecules are key players in helping the organism to cope with stressed environment. For example, there are different types of molecules that direct the cells whether to survive or to die. So interestingly, in our study from these two organisms, we have identified a number of such molecules where we can really, if we study those molecules, we can see whether we can actually see the direction, whether the cells are going to die or cells are going to survive. And that's something extraordinary, and that's something very important. I think such information can provide useful insight for further development of new organisms, new model organisms, to better understand how organisms survive and how we can use it in our coming future.
We are thankful to Dr. Abhrajyoti Ghosh for providing us with his valuable time.